Hello Photoshop Senior Edition folks. We're going to do something pretty different, I guess, this time. I hope you find this useful. We're going to experiment with a few different images so you can kind of get the idea how it's going to look and feel and make adjustments, and hopefully you'll be able to grab some of your own images and apply this technique. We're going to create our own light beams to put in our images. And like I said, we're going to use a few different images to show you this. But first thing we need to do to get going is to create the light beams themselves. So let's click on File, New. We're just going to create a brand new document, and I want this to be in inches. It helps my mind to keep it simple. So let's put it on black, and let's go ahead and give this a name, Sunbeams, and create. Alright, so here's our blank slate to create whatever we want. This is going to start out looking a little odd, but we're going to go to the paintbrush, and we're going to select a brush that's a little bit different because we need to create these rays, and they need to be random. So let's go in, click on the actual brush button, and I want to use this maple leaf for my paint. And if you don't see the maple leaf when you bring up your brushes, go to this gear up here, click on that, and all of these different brushes, and it goes on down below my recording area, but all of these brushes are free for you to use, and there's some really unique brushes on there. I could use, for instance, this butterfly for this technique as well, but I like the sharp edges of this maple leaf for creating what we want to create. So I'm going to click on it. Then I'm going to jump over here to this little folder, which is the control for all of the brushes. I'm going to drag this out where you can better see all of it. And let me see if I can scooch this up in the recording area a little better. This is our preview window. And notice I've got leaves all over the place because I've already done some work with this in the past. All of these different things are turned on. So here's the way it would normally start. Brush tip shapes. And here's the spacing. I like to get the spacing kind of separate stuff out a little bit better. And if I move this out of the way just temporarily and paint, you'll see what the leaves look like with the current settings I have. Now notice it's gray, and that's because the opacity is way down. So now if I paint, it's white like our foreground color is. So I'm going to undo that. Control Z, Control Z, Control Alt Z, so I can go back a little further. Now what I need to do is create a new layer in my layers palette to put these leaves on. I don't want this on my background, so let's go down to the new layer icon right next to the little trash can, and let's just call this beams. Alright, so let's move this back over again and paint. So if I want to get rid of that real quick, all I have to do now, because it's on its own layer, is do a Control A to select everything and hit backspace, and it just goes away. So we can experiment and hit backspace, draw some more, do a whole bunch, hit backspace. Nice. Alright, so here's what we need to do. Go ahead, and we're going to make this smaller, but we're going to do it a different way. Run your spacing out like you see here. This is on 137%. Then go down to Shape Dynamics. Make sure this is checked, And then we want to change the size of this as they're painted. And that's what size jitter does. It changes randomly. Watch the preview window as I change the slider. You can see that the size is being adjusted. The diameter also needs to be jittered. The angle, you see how they're turning. So as I change this, you can see some of them are one way, some of them are another, and the minimum roundness, all that. Then we go to scattering, and we want them scattered a little bit. And the count, I would say on 1. Count jitter. Now when we paint, you see they're not so thick and so many of them. All right, so let's just go to the shape dynamics again. We're going to kind of fine tune this. Now what I would do is write down the settings that I have as well. Let's go back here to the spacing. We'll bring them a little closer together that way. All right, hitting backspace. Here's what we're going to do. Let's get the brush out of the way. I'm going to put that back in here. Actually, I'm just going to move it out of the way for now. I want this to be painted basically on a straight line. So I'm going to turn on my rulers. And to do that, we just hold down the command or the control key and press the letter R as in radio. And that brings up our rulers going across the top and down the left side. And I'm going to go into the ruler with my mouse, click, hold down the mouse, and drag a guide down. Alright, so now I want to go over here to the left, and I'm going to click once and come over here and shift click. That basically paints my leaves in a straight line. Yes, they are scattered, but they're going in a straight direction. I'm going to do the same thing going back the other direction. Click here and go down here and shift click. Alright, that's enough. I'm going to get rid of this guide. I'm going to turn on my move tool, and now I can just move that guide out of the way because it's disturbing when you don't need it. Alright, so our beams layer now has a straight line of leaves. Okay, we go to filter, down to blur, motion blur, and you see immediately what happened to our leaves. So you can make it go longer, shorter, much shorter. I'm going to go with something around there. Okay, now here comes the beauty of it. I'm going to turn the marching ants off, number one. That also bothers me right now. Control D will turn off those little pests. Now I want to transform these beams into the sunbeams. So I can move that around because it's on its own layer. So let's do a Control or Command T as in Tango. And I'm going to hold down the Control key. That's what gives you all the power over transforming an object. If you hold down the Control key, you can do anything with your selection, top and bottom. Okay, so right now I want to swing this top in to give it a, where does this light come from? This is the source area. Try to keep that kind of straight there at the top. We can then just drag this down without the shift key down, and we can adjust this. We can have the shift key down or the control key down and do whatever we want with this. We can spread it out more. And so on. So we'll say that's fine because that's our light beam. If we want to make this a harder more pronounced light beam, all we have to do is make an exact copy of that layer by holding down Control or Command and press the letter J as in jump. And there our light beam is much stronger. To combine these into one, all we have to do is Control E or Command E on a Mac, and now we have our light beams. So now we can take these light beams into any image we want to. There's two ways, two easy ways. We can do a Control A, which selects the entire layer. We can do a Control C, as in Charlie, to copy it to the Photoshop's virtual clipboard. Now we can go into an image and do a Control V as in victory or Command V, and now our light beams are in this image here. The other way, and I'm going to just hit delete. The other way to do it is, and this only works with newer versions of Photoshop, you click on the beam layer itself, drag it, hold it down, click, hold, and drag it to whatever image you want it to go in, then bring it down and let go. And there are the light beams. Okay, so we've got them in this church scene. Let's go ahead and use it here. I'm going to once again transform it, so Control or Command T, and I'm just going to put the light source out here, and I can bring it in. I can expand it. Once again, I can hold down the Control key and do whatever I want to with these beams. Okay, that includes any corner that there is in the image. Okay, I'll double click. Now we can make this stronger again if we want to, simply by Command or Control J, and we get twice the beam. Okay, totally up to you what you want to do. If we go that light, it's going to look one way, and I'm just going to use two, and again I'm going to do Control or Command E to combine the two layers. Alright, so obviously we've got this light coming in now, but the church is dark in this area, so the two don't make much sense. So what I'm going to do is go back to the background layer. I'm going to make a copy of that, Control J or Command J again, to make that exact copy. And this time I'm going to go to the adjustment layers, and we can go up and click on Adjustments tab if that's up there, but it's always going to be at the bottom of the layers palette with that little yin-yang symbol. And I'm just going to click on Levels. Now notice it gives me a mask right off the bat, and I'll show you why that's important in just a minute. Let's go ahead and bring the light end of the slider. This is the blacks, and these are the whites. So let's go ahead and just drag that in to really lighten that up. And we can also lighten the midtones if we want to, but I think that's just going to bleach things out a little bit. So let's just go with that. We can come back and adjust it if we want to, but notice we really lightened things up. We can go a little bit more. I think that would help. And now it's affecting the entire image. It doesn't hurt much up in here, but we've bleached out some of this on the front of the church, and it doesn't look that great overall anyway. So what we're going to do, where this layer mask has been created, we want to fill this with black, which will basically negate all this light. So we'll fill that with black. Black is on top over here, so if we hold down the Alt key and hit backspace, it fills that with black. So now we can control what did actually get lit up on the church, or what does get lit up. So we're turning on a brush, and we don't want the leaves now, so let's click up here and let's just select a nice soft brush. Let's look and make sure nothing crazy is turned on in the brush properties. So let's just bring that back over here. And spacing, let's just turn the spacing totally off to 1%, I mean. And none of the things are checked over here. Transfer, that's fine. I'm going to move that back out of the way. Make my brush larger. The keys next to the letter P on your keyboard are the bracket keys. The right bracket key makes the brush larger. The left bracket key makes the brush smaller. So I'm going to make it big. And I want this to be the opacity of this brush down to, say, 35 or so. Then I'm just going to paint right in the areas that I want to lighten. But to make the changes show, I have to paint white into this mask. So I switch the colors over here to white, and that's still coming back really fast. So Control Z that, and let's go down. And I'm just going to type in 20. So now we can bring it back slower and light that front up just exactly the way we want it. Get down here in the grass. Let's lighten some of this up in the trees. And if you look in the mask, you see what's going on, that we're only showing the parts that are clear or white. Okay, so we can lighten all of this stuff up. Let's put some light up here. Now the light beams make a whole lot more sense, right? Alright, so let's warm up the light beams a little bit. To do that, we'll click on the beams layer. And again, we're going to go to the adjustments, and we're going to click on the Use Saturation adjustment. If you don't see it here, again, you can go down to the little yin yang and go to Use Saturation. And what we're going to do is colorize again. And if we see it affect the entire image until we click this little icon, which means that it's going to clip that layer into the layer below it. So that's the only thing that's going to be affected. So we click that, and you don't really see a change in the beams until you lower the light. And then let's go up to where the color is, and let's take the saturation up. You can see the color in there now, because if we go up here, you can see what's happening with the color. We'll keep it nice and warm. So if we want to change that, we can always come back to that, and notice that we have a warm beam coming down into the church. So let's go to the colors that are affecting the church, the lightening the church up, and let's just double click on that. And we can go into the channels and bump the color of any of the channels up. Let's click that and change the green a little bit. So you can see how that affects it also. And on the beams, I think this is a little strong. So let's back the saturation down a little bit. Bring the light up a little bit. If we want to, we can also copy this beams layer, Control J, and move them slightly. Turn on the Move tool. So now we have even more rays coming down into the image. Let's change the opacity of those so they're not so strong. So you see, we can do all kinds of things with these particular layers. Now, this is only affecting this layer right here, so we can actually duplicate that and put it over the other beams layer. And once again, we need to click this. So now we have a hue saturation over both sets of beams. And adjust the light accordingly. There's some places in here that I missed, but I think you get the idea of how you can add those beams to that particular image. So let's go back over to the beams that we created, and let me show you that again on this image so you can see it a little more clearly. If we want to double the beams in the image, we can simply do a Control J right here, and then with the Move tool we can shift that a little bit, and now we have twice the number of rays coming down. If we want to vary that a little bit, we can once again turn on the Control T and slightly adjust these so they're not identical looking beams. Some of them are crossing there, so we can go to the top, stretch that out over there, and just really warp that however we want to do that. So again, let's turn that off. You'll see twice the number of beams coming down, basically the same opacity. We can do a Control E to put those on the same layer. Sorry about that. We've got a little overlap up here at the top, so we can do one of two things. We can mask that, or we can just turn on the eraser and just erase that up there. What I would recommend if you're going to erase it is use a soft brush, so the hardness would be all the way to the left. Make it bigger, so right bracket key, and change the opacity a little bit. So now up here at the top it's a soft transition. Okay, so now we've got double the beams. Let's just take that into another image. So click and drag, and we're going to go into this barn image. You can see the rays right off the bat. Turn on the Move tool and move it around, and this time I'm going to turn it coming from this direction. So Control T and run it from here and move that off there. Double click it so you see the beams coming in. Once again, let's put some color on the beams with hue saturation. We'll colorize it. We'll click on this little icon not to affect the entire image. We'll warm it up, run the saturation up, run the lightness down. Okay. Again, let's go down and work on the background to lighten it up. Let's make a copy of it, Control J. So now we have two copies of this. So let's take one of these, and again I'm going to do a levels adjustment, run the light up, and I can go ahead and change the channels a little bit if I want to, add some red in there if I want to warm it up a little. We can go too far, just a little bitty bit, and we're going to fill that with black. So black is the background color. Hold down the controller command key, hit backspace, and now you don't see the changes at all, but we're going to paint with white in the mask, and that's going to allow us to lighten this up with that little bit of warmth that we created. This is staying in shadow, that up here is staying in shadow. I don't like the angle of the beams right now, so I'm going to do a Control T and change that a little bit like that. and I can narrow that a little bit. If I do a Control-0, I get to see all of this. So I'm going to hold down the Control key and scooch that in a little bit. Same there. Make it a little more of a direct beam of light. Control-0 again. Now, it might have been good if we did this one with the single copy of the sun rays instead of having so many. You know, that's the benefit of, actually we should have made a copy over here and left the two separate. And then we could have done whatever we wanted inside the image. If we want to, again, make the beams stand out more, we do a Control-J to copy that layer. And let's go back down here on this mask. Let's make sure we get that lightened up through there. And switching back to black, make sure that we're not lightening up the areas that are not in the beams. Now, if we want more of the light, we just double click back on that again, and we can bring the light up some more. We just don't want to blow the color out, but I like the contrast that's there. So I'm just trying to give you some ideas about the beams. So let's go back to the beams again. I'm going to go back in history before I created the other set. There we go. Now I'm going to take that layer excuse me, and run it up here to this image and down. Now this one's going to need to be a little bit harsher. Maybe not. Let's do a Control-T to bring the top in. Needs to be a bit narrower. Let's do a Control-0 so we can see this. Control-0 again. Maybe let's try a Control-J there to build that up a little. Okay, it's still a little bit weak. Excuse me. So let's go back over here again, and let's do a Control-J. Actually, we can go back down here where we created them. Let's go with more beams this time. All right, so I love history. I still remember vividly the days when we didn't have history. I'm going to throw these away, just hitting backspace, go back here, and drop it in there. So now it's a lot more beams coming down. Let's do a Control-T, holding down the Control key again to narrow that top, and we'll just put it right in there. And again, use saturation. Didn't mean to do that. Colorize, drop that, hit this. Lots of little things to tweak. Saturation up, lightness down. You can see that made those go much lighter. If you see, you know, you can move that around and see how the colors are affecting. Okay, last image, this one. Let's bring the beams into that image. So we go up here, drop that, and again I'm going to do a Control-T, bring the top in, and let's just bring this bottom down. Still holding down the Control key. Spread this out. And we're going to need to, I'm going to use arrow keys to kind of place that fine-tuned light. Let's make a copy of that, Control J, so we have a little more pronounced light there, and a Control E to sandwich them. Now you know how to change the color. We're going to go use saturation again, colorize, hit the little clip, and run this up, run this up, run this down. Now, this one's different, and I sought this one out for a reason. We're coming into a much darker area and hitting this, and notice the beams, all of them are coming across the foreground tree trunks, which is not realistic in any way, shape, or fashion. So what we're going to do is kind of clip that off of these trees a bit. And to do that, we go to the layer that the beams are on, which is right here, and we go out here to the right hand side where it's just blank and double click it. That brings up the layer styles. Now what we need to do is clip the areas that are dark, and the way to do that, it's light against dark. So we go to underline layers on the black side, and we bring the slider to the right, and watch what happens. Now you see the beams coming down, but it went away on the darker tree trunks. Now let me back that up and show you what's happening. See it kind of eat away? Well, it's effective to some degree, but it can look pretty nasty when you get that kind of an effect. So to make it smooth, you click on this, and to split that, instead of it just being one piece, you hold down the Alt or Option key on a Mac and click it, and it splits apart. And if you look in the image, it's gradually getting that off of the dark areas. We'll allow a little bit of that to come in, and not all of it. Okay, so now we've got the beams coming in nicely up here, and just some light strays shooting through the trees, right? Now if we wanted to, again, we could make a copy of that so it'd be more pronounced. Again, it's the copy of that, and it shows you right here the work we did on the layer styles. So if we go in, you can see it's already clipped some. You don't have to go back and hold down the Option key or the Alt key again. You can just further drag it, and you can see what's going on with the light when you do. Whoops, I went and grabbed the whole thing again. So Alt or Option, and we can knock a lot of that right back down. So I hope you can see the advantage to creating some of your own beams for some things. I tried to find a wildlife shot that I wanted to use, but it just sometimes takes too long to find all the images that you want to use in something like this. But there's enough here that I think you get the idea how this can be helpful. Now I can take this sunbeam layer, and if I had kept these separated, and again I can go back in history to where it wasn't all of the, you can just go with, we can just go with that, and then I can save this as a PSD file on my computer, and it'll save my layers, and I can use that beam in any image I want to anytime I want to. I don't have to go back and use the leaves to create more beams. I can just keep using these. But if you use the leaves to create more beams, or whatever brush you use, all of the brushes will work to a different degree. When you do that randomization like we did to create the beams, it's going to be different every time. So sometimes you'll get much better beams than the previous time, and you may just hit that magic bunch of beams that you love, and definitely you will want to save those as a PSD file on their own layer. If they're on your one layer, it won't do you any good. But having it on its own layer like this allows you to do whatever you want with it. Alright, that wraps up everything on this video, gang. I hope you experiment with this and have some fun with it. Talk to you all later. Ask me any questions about it you want, remember. Bye-bye.